What monumental blunder lost you parents your connection with your children? I've come to terms with the fact that my son and I will never be friends. I received a somber reminder of this yesterday, yet it happened last year. Here are some background details before we get started on this train wreck of a narrative. I started working as an auto mechanic when I was 19 years old, and I opened my own garage and store when I was 28. I got remarried a few years after my first marriage ended in shame. Similar to my present spouse, she had a son from her previous union. At the age of 4, my stepson began to view me as his biological father when his own father abandoned him. Although my first marriage's son lived with his mother, I saw him frequently since he would stop by my business on his way home from school. Every now and then he would stop by to greet me or take a peek at the cars I had in the shop. In actuality, my wife and her ex-wife got along nicely. Despite living with his mother, there were never any problems when my son stayed over or stayed for dinner. My dad got me a black Chevrolet Chevelle Cess for my 17th birthday. I have always taken care of the car throughout my life. 90% of that automobile still has its original parts, which is why I adore it to the core. As a mechanic, I had no trouble taking care of everything on my own. This car was usually at my house garage or in front of my shop. My kid also cherished this vehicle. He was well-versed in rides and constantly desired to accompany them. In fact, he had a tiny model car that resembled it. You could be wondering, where did things go wrong? 8 years ago, my ex-wife remarried as well, although they relocated to a different location after her new spouse accepted a job offer. After then, I talked to my son primarily over the phone and saw him for a long weekend or for a half week, maybe once every 3 to 4 months. The phone calls eventually stopped, and he explained that he wanted to concentrate on his studies, which made sense given that he was still a teenager. It wasn't my fault if that was him. By then, my stepson had turned 10. My kid moved to a university several states away when he was 16, and I hardly had time to see or talk to him. At the time, my wife had developed kidney failure in E. coli, and my business was struggling. Even though it was difficult to maintain order throughout, we managed to get through it all, and my wife is now doing much better. In April 2019, my stepson celebrated his 16th birthday. He invited my son since he and my son always got along. Although he was occupied at the moment, my son assured me he would return a few days later. I was happy he was visiting because I hadn't seen him in over 4 years after all that. This is the section where I made a huge mistake. My stepson excelled academically. Even in hard times, he was able to maintain outstanding marks and gain admission to the university of his choice to pursue a medical degree. I chose to gift him my 1977 Chevrolet Chevelle for his 16th birthday because my wife and I were so proud of him. It really amazed him and his pals as well. It's an automobile that continues to have an impact today. Regretfully, it had an unanticipated effect on my son and me connection. Unaware of what was going to happen, I texted him a photo of my stepson with the automobile during his 16th birthday celebration. I got a text from my son asking, "Is this a joke?" I texted him back at the time, not understanding, asking why. A few seconds later, he called and yelled at me to clarify that it was a joke. He informed me that when he was 10 years old, I made a commitment to give him the car if he performed well in school. When he called me a bad father who didn't care about his genuine son, that's what got me to yell back at him over the phone. Let me tell you, from that moment on, unpleasant things were spoken by both parties. My spouse informed me that there was a miscommunication and advised me to cool down and discuss it. That's when I did the worst thing I've ever done, and I would do it again if I could. In a flash of wrath, I told my son he didn't deserve the car, and if he changed his attitude, he could call me back. I got into an argument with my wife after I hung up the phone because she had defended my son. It didn't matter to me at the time. Having been referred to as a bad father offended me. A few days later, I attempted to get in touch with my kid, but I never received a response. I believe he gave a new phone number a day following the altercation. It didn't matter to me at all at the time. My ex-wife, enraged beyond belief, called 3 weeks later. In retrospect, I realized that my son did not extend an invitation to me, even though it appeared that he had graduated from university. My son told my ex-wife that she immediately thought it odd that I wasn't present. Right then, he told her everything that had happened, including the fact that he intended to invite me to the graduation on the day he was meant to come. The saddest part is that he was reportedly among the best in his class and was about to graduate as an automotive service technician. That's when I realized I was a horrible father after all. I didn't even think to inquire what he was studying during those 4 years. I didn't see him and all the stress going on around me. Unlike my stepson, my ex-wife informed me he was upset and felt unloved. She broke down in tears over the phone, explaining that all he wanted was to be a mechanic like me. It seems that he desired to return to work alongside me in my shop and take over when I retired. I felt like a complete idiot for telling him those things, and my whole life fell apart in front of me. Seeing as he desired to never communicate with me again, my ex-wife refused to provide me with his new phone number and address. She also warned me not to get in touch with her ever again. I fought with my wife about it on a couple occasions during the past year. If returning the car meant that my son would return, my stepson would have accepted something else. For the past 11 months, I have attempted to contact him. The last I heard about him until a few months ago, he was employed by a major automaker. Regretfully, they declined to provide any details regarding the employees. He unexpectedly sent me a package yesterday. It had no return address or letter attached, but I could tell it was from him nonetheless. It contained a videotape, an old photo of him and me on the car's bonnet that had been torn up, and his old Chevrolet toy car. He was presumably 7 years old when I watched the clip. I was repairing an automobile in the video. Halfway through, I started crying because I finally understood why he had mailed me the tape. As he was shooting, I told him that if he continued to do well in school, the store and my Chevy might eventually belong to him.